The agenda? So moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to recess into executive session.
I make a motion, we move into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel, legal matters, and student matters.
All those in favor?
We need a roll call.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Al?
Yes.
Ms. Clendenin? Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Strickler?
Yes.
Mr. Ward?
Yes.
All right.
All right, we're back in open session. At this point, item 3.01, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, we have our first opportunity for public comments. The school board welcomes questions, ideas, and comments from persons in attendance. Members of the audience may comment during the public comment portion of the meeting when recognized by the board president. We ask that comments be limited to 3 minutes in order to complete the agenda within a reasonable time. We also ask that comments begin by providing your name, address, and school district in which you reside. Would anyone like to make a public comment at this time? All right, seeing none. Next item, 5.01, I will just draw your attention to the correspondence log. This is updated regularly with communications from anybody who wants to reach out to the Board of Education, and this document is available online for inspection should anybody want to review it. Celebrations from the Board of Education. Let's start with Arnold.
I'll pass.
Couple things. First of all, attended the foundation event last night at Cyrano's. As usual, very fun. Lots of good food, good catching up with several parents in the district and folks who have been very influential and have a long history of helping the district. Want to give a shout out to Sean Wright and to John Thomas, John M. I had the pleasure of being asked to participate on a Brain Injury Association Missouri panel as a school board rep. They had one of their day-long conferences dealing with students that had experienced concussions and their protocols and things like that, and they wanted to have representation of somebody that's on the board as far as policy and procedure and things like that. And as much as I had some personal experience with that and also some exposure to it, I also needed to make sure I was a little more in tune with the details and get into the weeds a little bit more. And I appreciate Sean giving me some really detailed information as far as policies and procedures in our district and how those are communicated out to not only the high school level where he has most influence because of the teams that he supports, but also how that filters down to our grade schools for injuries that might be suffered in gym classes and things like that. And John participated and helped me getting some of that information, so I felt like that went really well. And then lastly, and I know that I believe our new incoming board members, both Keita and Christine, are going to attend the Ed Plus Candidate Forum, where they have a panel of people that are there to talk to people that are going to be running for their boards. All their member districts usually try to have their candidates come, and I'm very blessed to be asked to participate on the board panel again this year for that.
Great.
So I'll try to represent well.
Thanks. And Marcia?
No items, please.
Okay. David?
I attended the kindergarten open house at a couple of places, and then Jean filled in for one as well. And I just want to say it was very exciting just to go and see the new parents. I was at Clark and I was at Edgar Road, and just to see all the parents were excited to have their children coming in, and it was nicely put together.
Well, the 8-year one was very nice too. I'd forgotten that one of the things you should do to prep your student for that first day of kindergarten is teach them how to tie their shoes. You forget those things when your kids get older. But I'd also like to talk about the cooperation between area school districts. Our last Legislative Advocacy Committee meeting was in Kirkwood. The next one is in Clayton. And several of us are going to Jeff City tomorrow for the School Board Association Legislative Advocacy Day. And I know Kirkwood is letting us meet with Scott Sifton at the same time because his schedule's busy. So it's really nice to have that cooperation because so many of the issues we're concerned with are similar. And this Thursday, I'm looking forward to going to Maplewood Richmond Heights. They've invited us all to see a documentary called Backpack Full of Cash. It's a documentary on the privatization of education and why we should be concerned. It's narrated by Matt Damon. So I think it's going to be a really good film. 7 o'clock at Maplewood Richmond Heights Auditorium, and anybody's welcome. And so I just love when they get opportunity to show a film like that, and they couldn't even preview it to their board without special approval. So to open it up to people in the whole community is really nice.
What's the date and time on that, Jean?
This Thursday at 7 o'clock. Backpack Full of Cash.
I went to the high school parent club meeting where they had a speaker on all the new non-tobacco nicotine products like Juuls and all kinds of craziness, which was crazy and really, apparently really prevalent, especially I guess at Hickson. And kids are just doing it in class, tuck it in your shirt sleeve, it's like this big, there's no smoke. Anyway, it was a really good presentation and really eye-opening. And I think Dr. Clark seemed like he was going to focus on that at the high school level, trying to make kids aware that it really is as bad as smoking cigarettes. It's not, because I think there's this misperception that, yeah, it's fine, it doesn't hurt you, it's all good. But really, one little package of the Juuls is equivalent to a pack of cigarettes. So, anyway, frightening.
Yeah.
I guess not much. Though our girls swim finished last week with a phenomenal record. I think they lost one home meet, so that was good. And our guys basketball team is on a winning record. There's a game on Thursday if you're not attending the film, but yeah, lots of exciting sports accomplishments. But yeah, that's all.
I also attended the Cyrano's Foundation event. That's one of my favorite events that they host every year, and the organizers do a really great job highlighting a local business, opportunity just to visit with school district folks and enjoy good food and beverages, and performances by our jazz band, which is definitely a highlight. Clark, I attended my 12th and final Clark Elementary Trivia Night. Yeah. So great job to the PTO and to the organizers of that event. One thing I've noticed about that event that's changed over the years is the number of teachers that attend and participate, which is really nice. And that's something that participation has increased over the last several years, and that's so nice to see. And then, I don't know when it was, John, but you and I we went to Jeff City with a group of St. Louis area superintendents to basically advocate for public education issues to our local representatives and senators. And it was a bus that took all of us to Jeff City, and we had the opportunity to meet with some of the lobbyists for the Missouri Association of School Administrators, as well as to meet individually with our representative, Sarah Etziker, and our Senator Scott Sifton, and just to get our voice out there and encourage them to keep advocating for public schools. There are, as always, many what I consider to be threats to public education going on in Jeff City. So I think anytime we have a chance to get in front of our state reps and senators, it's a good thing. So nice to see that. I know the board, I'm probably going to pass on the one tomorrow because I was just there. But let's hit them from all fronts. Let's have board members there advocating as well as administrators there advocating.
And Joe and
Joe.
Philip. So we
Are you
have
gonna
two
go?
students
Yeah.
going.
Awesome, good.
We'll be packed in my wife's minivan, which will be fun.
All right.
Kathy B, do you have
Administrators?
any
I
to?
have one. DECA, the High School Marketing and Business Organization, recently had its competition for the district level. We had 30 high school students who are going to move on to state, which is terrific. And we expect to hear how they do it in a couple of weeks. I think it's closer to spring break when we do that. I won't read all the names.
Yeah. I had a few as well. I got to participate in Clark Trivia Night as a guest reader. I'm sure it was really exciting for the participants, but got to read a gold and first, famous first. It was a good opportunity to connect with some different parents and thank them for their support of Clark School and the Webster Grove School District. It was fun. I don't know how your team ultimately finished.
I don't either.
Maybe, but Arden Armstrong, I wanted to lift up Arden Armstrong. She's one of our high school students. I recently, with my daughter, attended her braiding event. She hosted a braiding event for
dads and other special friends, and so I got to learn how to braid my daughter's hair. And I've gotten some really good compliments from some of her friends who thought that it was her mom. So she was excited to say it was her dad. Also wanted to recognize the Silver Strings. Our Silver Strings from Webster Groves High School is going to perform at Carnegie Hall, which is a pretty extraordinary thing in a few weeks. So quite an accomplishment for the leaders of that group as well as the students, demonstrating their commitment. Julie Burchett, last week, John Clark and I had the opportunity, along with Glenn Dietrich, to go to the Heart of the Community Awards, which is the Webster Rock Hill Shrewsbury Chamber, and they honor a lot of different people, and Julie kind of got the signature of award, which is the Heart of Gold Award. And so it was a nice honor for somebody who works extraordinarily hard on behalf of our students. So that was an honor. Lastly, the guest of honor this evening, Nicholas Braun. Nicholas, would you mind standing with me for a quick second? Nicholas Braun is, many of you probably recognize Nicholas from many things, but especially he's an incredible gifted singer. I've so enjoyed listening to you perform with your different groups, by yourself and solos in these groups. But the reason Nicholas is here tonight is Nicholas earned a perfect 36 ACT score. Wow. So pretty impressive. Again, some perspective that there's fewer than 3,000 students in the United States that attain this score. The top 1/10 of 1% of those who take this test. And as I was doing some research, I saw that the 35, there's like over 12,000 kids who get a 35. Still far from me, I can assure you. But just to show you the elite company that Nicholas is in with this score. And we wanted to acknowledge him here tonight, an extraordinary effort, commitment to learning. Wanted to recognize your parents as well. So here's this, Nicholas, and I want to congratulate you. And if there's anything that you would like to share about, I know you're a junior.
I am.
So
there's nothing else I would like to say, just thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nicholas. You want to introduce your parents to the phone?
This is my mom and dad, Melanie and Mark Braun. They've done okay.
Thank you.
How many college applications are you getting? People recruiting you?
We're still in the process.
I think your mailbox will be more full than most students.
I get in the mail every day.
Yeah?
About 6.
We'll get about
Okay,
26 emails every day.
Wow.
Oh,
That's great.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Hire a secretary.
That's great.
All right, next up is board calendar. Anything in particular we need to talk about here? I guess I do have a question about the March 4th Let's Talk. Do we have a location set for that? Anyone?
How did Lucky's work?
It's Brett Cove.
Back to Brett Cove.
Okay. Joe, Steve, right?
That's
It was
my
you,
name.
right? Yeah, Super Bowl Sunday. I'm just trying to remember who's there.
Yes,
You
it
guys
was.
and David stopped by for a bit. We had one.
Just to say hi, because it wasn't a meeting
It
with
was
4
not a
of us
meeting.
there.
Yeah, no.
He was a member of the public for a few minutes.
Yes, yes. We had one person stop by and visit, and she mainly was there because she just wanted to say thank you for all we do and kindly show her support. So attendance wasn't great again, but we will try the 4th at Redco and see how that goes. Yeah, if you want to go home and study and sing or whatever, be successful.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Since we're meeting again, do we want to nail down who's
Yeah,
coming
let's
to
talk
that?
about who's going to do the next Let's Talk, March 4th.
I can be there.
So I hear Jean, Arnold. All right, sounds good. And if anybody else happens to be available that day, we can have 3 without having a quorum.
I was just going by to get Caesar salad, by the way, lest anybody, and I don't sell
I
Caesar
believe
salad
we
in
technically talked
bags.
about the Super Bowl, yeah, it was very, yeah.
But no, we didn't talk about anything related to anything school related.
Okay. Reports from superintendent and staff. Mr. Ellerman, I believe you are up first.
No, I can't do it.
Good job.
Well, good evening. Tonight we would like to talk with the board about need for some additional space, specifically at Edgar Road Elementary, that has been identified really on the heels of the updated enrollment projections that the board received last month in January, and also in light of a staffing plan that had been received by or had been put together by the principal, Ms. Wook. What's really happening here, first I'd say this is a report only. We're not asking for any board action tonight at this time. However, we would plan on bringing something to the board, as we'll discuss during the presentation, to the board for approval at the next meeting, February 26th. Particularly what's happening is enrollment is growing. It's growing somewhat district-wide, but it's really more concentrated in the south end of the district and at Edgar Road in particular. And as we started taking a look at it, what we found in the enrollment projections for Edgar Road in particular was growth starting this year. And remember, the enrollment projections are for our resident students. It doesn't necessarily reflect how many students show up at the school door to register. It's how many students are projected at those grade levels that reside in the Edgar Road attendance area. Some of those students may elect to attend a computer school. Some of those students may elect to attend private or parochial schools. But then on the other side, we have some non-resident students that attend Edgar Road, particularly or specifically students of staff, perhaps, or students of special school district staff. Not a lot, but a few. And so these numbers don't reflect the actual number of enrollment at Edgar Road, but it gives you a sense of the trend in enrollment because as the resident population grows, the actual enrollment tends to grow as well at the school. And what we're looking at this year is about 422 students, but next year that goes up to 437. And where that becomes even more important than the overall number is at the grade level, because that then, when we apply the district class size targets and the class size guidelines, results in how many sections and how many classrooms are needed at each individual grade level. And what you can see when you look at these numbers in particular is that we have a smaller 5th grade class that is moving on to 6th grade. But that's then on the intake end of that is a larger kindergarten class coming. So basically we have a kindergarten class coming in that essentially needs 4 sections, but we have a 5th grade class that's exiting that only needed 3 sections. That means we have a net need for 1 additional classroom. That's actually compounded by the fact that one of the 4 current kindergarten classes is a half-size class. It's because it's in a half-size classroom. And because of the growth in the enrollment at the kindergarten level that's expected, it's no longer possible to have a half-size classroom and 3 full-size kindergarten classrooms and still maintain our class size targets. We need 4 full-size kindergarten classes. So we have a net need of 1 full-size, we'll call it 3rd grade classroom, and 1 full-size kindergarten classroom. So we need 2 additional full-size classrooms at Edgar Road next year. And as we look at the enrollment then after 2018-19, moving on to 19-20, you can see our current 4th grade class is at 60, or current 4th grade resident enrollment is at 69, 3rd grade's at 62. So we have kind of 3 smaller classes that are each going to exit the school consecutively each year going forward. So while we need 2 classrooms this coming year, we're going to need 1 additional classroom. We expect to need 1 additional classroom that year after, 18-19 and 19-20, and then another classroom in 2021, until now we've got that school at 4 sections essentially at each grade level, and the enrollment just continues to grow. The enrollment projections are done on a 5-year projection cycle. So, but the trend is up, and the expectation would be, as a year gets added to this each year going forward, that trend may continue. So what we're looking at is really kind of a long-term trend and a long-term challenge. And so what we considered in terms of trying to come up with the new space that's needed at Edgar Road, we first looked within the building itself to see, would there be a way that we could come up with the additional classroom space for next year? This is kind of a busy diagram, but it's the floor plan for Edgar Road Elementary, and the top portion is the portion that faces, that's the entry of the school facing Edgar Road. And one of the things that we looked at was we have a very large kindergarten classroom at the at the southeast corner of the building, and we had this large classroom plus some ancillary space around here, and we considered demolishing these walls, combining this space, and re-subdividing that area to hopefully make 2 classrooms. Unfortunately, when we did that, there's only enough space there to make 2 classrooms that would be less than 700 square foot each. The standard for a 1st through 5th grade classroom is 900 square feet, and the national standard for a kindergarten classroom, which needs even more, is about 1,200 square feet. It just wasn't enough in the school. That school has been experiencing enrollment growth for a number of years. We have eliminated the teacher's lounge. We've eliminated some other spaces. We've got a smaller than desirable music room that is adjacent to a smaller than desirable cafeteria area. That's over here. Is the music room. This is the cafeteria. They already have 6 lunch shifts there because of cafeteria space limitations. There's just not a whole lot to work with within the building. So,
Is there still a smaller element or kindergarten that was subdivided out of the library still? Is that's been moved out? Okay, I haven't been there for a little over a year, so thank you.
So a solution couldn't be found within the school building, and we had to look outside of the school building, which means a modular building. That certainly wasn't our first choice, but it appears to be our only choice. And even at that, it's a temporary solution to probably what looks to be a longer-term problem. So the district is forming an enrollment committee to look at not just Edgar Road's enrollment, but enrollment district-wide, and taking a look at what information is being taken into account in making those enrollment projections, as well as how is the district going to then deal with the space implications of those enrollment projections in a sustainable way, instead of on a kind of a piecemeal way, which this somewhat is a piecemeal solution. We need 2 classrooms at Edgar Road for next year, and next year is only 6 or 8 months away right now. So the time is of the essence right now. In terms of that longer term context, one of the things that we were looking at, not only at Edgar Road, and this kind of shows the enrollment that is projected, and then translates that into what we think will be the actual enrollment at the school, and that's developed based on historical trends. When we had resident enrollment, for instance, in 2014-15 of 404 students, the actual enrollment at the building was 371. The next year, 15-16, we had resident enrollment of 408, but the actual enrollment at the school was 385. We track that so then we can develop a relationship between, a correlation between those numbers. That correlation is roughly 106%. So the projected number turns out to be about 106% of what the actual enrollment is. So then as we look at the projected numbers we get in the enrollment projections, we apply that 106%, essentially divide the projected number by the 1.06 to get what we think is going to be the actual enrollment, assuming that the correlation, the historical correlation, continues in the future. So as we look forward at that, we can see using the building capacities here, we have a desirable capacity at Edgar Road of 389, and we've defined this for each of the schools around the district to see what the enrollment capacity would be at a desirable level, which means essentially if all of our classes are at the class size desirable targets that the district has set. And for kindergarten, first and second grade, that target is 17. For third and fourth grade, 20, and for fifth grade, 22. I believe that's correct. When you take those 6 grade levels and average them, it's 18.83 students per classroom. And so that's what the capacity number here, the desirable capacity, is count up the number of classrooms at a building, take it times the average desirable capacity per classroom, and that's where the 389 comes from. The maximum that a class is allowed at K-5 level is allowed to have before we split it into another class is 3 above that desirable target. So for instance, if a kindergarten class reaches when we got 20 and there's one more kid enrolls, at that time we look at splitting the class. So we could have 3 classes of 20, we get one more kindergarten that enrolls in the school. The district generally would then add a 4th section of kindergarten. So what we did in terms of defining what would the realistic maximum capacity be for a building, we took 10% above what the desirable capacity was, which 3 above the 17 to 20 is a 15% error, 15% allowance. But that, it doesn't occur evenly at each grade level. So we thought in terms of being reasonable and accounting for the variations by grade level, that we would use a 10% factor to try to define a maximum capacity for planning purposes. You can see for Edgar Road, the cells that are highlighted in yellow are those that exceed the desirable capacity. And then when we hit and exceed the maximum capacity, those are highlighted in red. The important numbers are the actual numbers. Projected aren't the number of kids that show up at our doorstep. That's the actual numbers. So you can see that this year we're even above in terms of actual enrollment what the desirable capacity is. Next year that was going to continue, and in 2020-21 we were going to exceed the maximum capacity for the buildings. But you have to understand that these numbers are based on averages. And so, it's kind of like looking at the enrollment in the entire school district and having an enrollment capacity of 5,000 for the entire school district, but then that capacity is not in the right place because all of the growth is happening in one area and decline in another area. So now you have space where you don't have students, and students where you don't have space. Well, it's kind of the same way when you look at an individual building. Since students don't occur evenly at each grade level, there's variations there, and using averages it's a good tool for planning, but it's not definitive. So even though we're not above the maximum, when we look at the 412 that is projected for 2018-19, the way the students are falling by grade level isn't balanced, and therefore, even though we're not hitting the maximum, we still need some additional classroom space there. And so that's what's happening. And what that's telling us is that maybe for our capacity planning model, that instead of looking at a building and using averages, maybe we do need to take the enrollment projections by grade level, by building, and break it into sections and start planning for space needs that way. That's something the enrollment committee can look at. But this is how we've been doing it up to this point. And one of the things that I think is important to note is we kind of get away from Edgar Road and look at the elementary level in general, even just using the averages. When we look at the enrollment at the elementary level and where it's projected to trend over the next 5 years. In 2022, the actual enrollment at the elementary level is expected to be 2,218 students. Our maximum capacity is 2,251 students right now. So we're knocking on the door of our maximum capacity at the elementary level, and that's district-wide. So, then when you look at, well, that space would have to be ideally located district-wide in order for everything to fall into balance, and we know that that's not the case. So there is some planning conversations that need to happen and some analysis that needs to be done in terms of coming up with a longer-term solution to what is a longer-term challenge rather than just adding a modular building. But in terms of the immediate need that we have, the modular is really our only reasonable choice at this time. In terms of where we're proposing to put that modular building, this is kind of an overhead shot of the campus with the front of the building facing Edgar Road is on the downside at this time and over by the play area. The existing building is the one that's oriented east-west, and the one that we would be proposing to add is the one that is oriented north-south. This second building here, perpendicular essentially to the existing Edgar Road building. This is just a mock-up of where that would be located. We looked at some other potential locations for that building, specifically over here by the auditorium, auditorium area. We looked at potentially putting it in here, but there were some underground utilities and other space constraints that made that challenging and more possibly not feasible actually. And so we're looking at over here whether the building would be oriented the way that it's illustrated here, or whether it might be lined up parallel to the existing building in this area here. There's an underground drain right here, a storm drain that's here right now, and given the slope of the building and the water drainage, we're not sure if it would be feasible to put it here. But the proposed location is either here as it's illustrated, or just over in this area parallel to the existing one. We're estimating the cost to be, and this is matching the existing building as closely as possible with the pitch sink shingle roof and the brick, the faux brick on the exterior, so that it fits in with the campus as closely as possible. Estimated cost fully installed and including furniture as well that would be needed in the classrooms, $300,000 to $310,000. That's what we would be bringing. Right now we're collecting bids from companies, and that's what we would be bringing for approval at the next meeting.
Is for purchase then?
Yes.
Have we considered lease?
We considered lease, but this looks like it's a long-term need. A lease would normally be, if we had a shorter-term need that we were going to only use it for a while and then, divest ourselves of it. Looks like it's going to be needed at this campus for a while.
Bruce,
Bruce,
has a
thank you.
question.
So I seem to remember when we put the other modulars in, one of the things that's brought to us was that if we decided we went sort of in another direction, that there was a ready market to go and buy these things from us, and that was certainly part of the decision as well, that it was it represented something that if you wanted to get rid of it. And it is economically, do you think that's still the case, that if we decided in 5 years' time, let's say, we went in some other direction, we wanted to sell these things, that again, they based on what we know now, they're still relatively attractive to sell again?
Yeah, there is a market for these buildings, an aftermarket for modular classroom buildings.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I seem to recall the people that we bought this one from immediately said, and when you want it, sell it, we'll buy it back from you.
Yes.
And that, I thought that was, I thought that was a pretty good sign at that time. I recall the same thing too.
And, you know, I mean, it's like sometimes the question immediately come up after that, well, it could be, are we considering getting this from that market since maybe, you know, that we could save some money that way. It's possible that you might be able to save some money that way, but when we're trying to match the existing with everything, by the time you bought something used and then made it look like what we needed to fit in with the existing, you're not gonna.
I was confident that if that was an option, you'd bring it to us. I mean, you've always been a very good steward, and I felt certain I wasn't so fussed about that so much. It's just had conditions changed at all. Thank you.
Yes.
So I was very pleased with how the other modular units turned out. They were much better than I expected, and they seem to work very well for the students that are in there. But a couple concerns: is it taking away playground space, and is there easy access to bathrooms? If you're now talking about 4 classrooms being outside, have you considered all those necessary considerations?
Yes, well, here this evening with me is Rob Stuber, who takes care of all of the technical aspects of he's the construction manager for the district, and also Dr. Wook, the principal of Edgar Road. And we've had extensive conversations, both when we were exploring potential opportunities within the buildings, and then once it became apparent that a modular was really the only feasible solution, where was it going to be placed on campus and what would be best for that. So if would one of you want to respond to that?
Yeah, really the reason why the existing modular was placed where it is was for the shortest route from door to door. So the second one placed perpendicular to that, if you were to exit out the west of the building onto where you can see the sidewalk, that would be the shortest route to the exterior door, also leading through the library to the bathrooms. So that would be shortest point from the
Yeah, and in terms of the playground space, you can see it's on the blacktop. Just below that, there's a playground space, and then what you can't see on this picture is there's green space. So right now, students aren't allowed to use the green space just because it's too expansive for supervision. So what would happen, I stepped off the existing modular, the width, and then stepped off the new one, if it was placed this way. And then there's a kickball field right here on the blacktop that you can't see. This is the kindergarten, first and second grade playground, and there's plenty of, they can't get it to the new modular if we install it. So we're good there, but what I would recommend is that we then take advantage of the green space on the other side of the playground that we're not utilizing right now. So all we would really lose is a basketball hoop that is too tall for kindergarten and first grade that we're not using anyway. So I'm feeling okay with the playground space.
If you were able to orient it parallel to the existing one, given the drainage issues and drain that you had talked about, would there be a potential to essentially build a temporary bathroom that those 2 units could utilize in between them on one end or the other?
Knowing what I know about the sanitary systems on that side of the building, it would be tough and quite expensive.
Thank you.
There was actually consideration of at least bringing water supplies out there for sinks. It doesn't present itself on that elevation of the building.
Thank you,
A lot
Rob.
of underground work.
Yeah, when we looked at, when Dr. Wook looked at what she would ideally be located in the modular classrooms, she would have liked to have, I don't want to speak for her, but she would like to put art and music there, but art class requires water requires sewer, and so that would become really not feasible at that point. In terms of funding source for it, when we're talking about $310,000 of an item that wasn't really budgeted for in this year's budget, we would be, our plan would be to come to the board in the process of year-end budget adjustments. The district does have a $1,083,000 surplus this year, and we would be asking the board to, based on what the bids turn out to be, to allocate a portion of that surplus this year to cover that cost.
Bruce, I know this is a somewhat of a short-term fix. I guess anything or any idea what the long-term fix will be, or what it could be?
Well, I think we're probably a little bit too early in the process to be looking at that. We're looking at, in terms of what is needed. I think we were looking at 8 to 10, the equivalent of 8 to 10 classrooms to try to maintain space that's adequate for the desirable, to continue at the desirable level. How that is located, how that is managed in terms of planning for the district and structuring the district is just, I mean, too early really to speculate on that right now.
I have a question. This may be more for John than for, I don't think it's a question for you, but to the best of my knowledge, at this time, the only school that you're not allowed, elementary school that you're not allowed to transfer into if you don't live in that enrollment area is Avery. Are we at the point where we need to say no kids transferring into Edgar Road if you don't reside in Edgar Road?
I think we're probably there, personally, yeah.
Because if that's the case, then I think that we need to implement that.
Yeah.
starting next year.
I think if we have new families that are looking to send their kids to a different school, we could, probably would be wise to do that. I think allowing families that currently go there to continue going there, and if they have maybe a child that's enrolling in kindergarten, they have 3 kids that have been there for 5 or 6 years, to continue to let them go. But I think any new families, it would be wise for us. The enrollment projections that we showed at the last meeting showed that over the last 5 years, there's been a significantly, as Bruce shared, increase in the births in that area. And they are going to be, as you see in the data he presented, going to be catching Avery School, not catching them, but getting nearer to them over the next years, if the projection trends hold. Yeah, so I do think it would be wise. And again, she highlighted some of the different rooms. And again, when you look at like where that music room is in comparison to the other rooms, and you think about the instruments the kids are playing and everything, it's tight. It's tight. Those folks need some space.
I think that question is also something that the enrollment committee might want to talk about, because one of the things that you notice when we look at, and we're using the mid-series, you know, in the projection you have the high, mid, and the low, and the 5-year average series, we use the mid-series as kind of a straddling the fence position. And when you look at, over time, what happens to enrollment as the grades progress, if you've got kindergarten 76 in 17-18 here, that's 77 first graders, 79 second graders, 79 third graders. And so there's not a lot of enrollment growth over time, it looks like, when you look at these. And so there may not be a hard and fast answer to, we're going to cut it off for the building, but we may want to look at it a little bit more refined to how many kids do we have at that grade level, and if there looks like there might be room at that grade level, then it might make sense to do that, particularly if those students otherwise would have been at another school that's starting to kind of get crowded. If we have space at that grade level, while we don't at that building as a whole, if we do at that grade level, since there's not much enrollment growth over time as the grade levels progress, we might want to consider allowing that. But, you know, again, that's something maybe.
But then I would ask, how is this different from Avery? I mean, I think as long as I've been on the board, Avery's been a, no, you can't transfer in if you don't reside in that area. Is it just that there's the data to support that Avery enrollment over the past several years wouldn't allow it, and we're just not sure yet about Edgar Road depending on the grade level?
Yeah, I don't know that I can't really speak to Avery. I wasn't here at the time. I can speak to Avery going forward. It looks like they're getting to a better place. And even in the enrollment projections, as we apply those, you can see we have been over what is considered a maximum number very recently at Avery, and going forward, that trend is kind of going down and then stabilizing at an area that's close to desirable.
I think I would just prefer to have a hard and fast yes or no.
Yeah.
Because if we start doing it, well, in this grade level, in this class, we have room, then
Yeah.
that's going to create maybe some perception of unfairness.
Yeah. Well, I think too is what we'll sometimes find is that, you know, maybe the space, you know, maybe there's space in kindergarten, or there's space in this particular grade, but then all of a sudden, you get a bunch of kids who enroll, and we've got this practice of not moving the kids out.
Yeah.
So I just think, given how crowded it's becoming, it would be wise to kind of do what we did holistically with Avery. And I did want to clarify just one thing. The board admin is going to come together to collect data and information regarding enrollment. So we're really looking at what additional data. Bruce gave an example of some of that. And then when the time comes for a problem-solving process, we'll involve more representative group of stakeholders from our community for that problem-solving component. Right now, we're just going to be meeting to collect data. What data do we want to collect and then present before the board?
David?
So if you go back to that graph you had, or that table you had before, and you were sort of starting off on something that I noticed. So if we go down the down the various diagonals, if I look at the projections, they all, just eyeballing it, they all appear to be showing increases all the time. And if we look back at sort of the history, it's not consistently always going up. I was just sort of surprised that there weren't any instances where that number was going down. So, you go, for instance, in 1819, second grade is 73, it's 73, 1920, and fourth grade then it goes to 74 to 75 to 76, following down that diagonal. If you follow those diagonals down, they all seem to be going up, which seems... and then if I look at what the percentage increases are on your other one, it looked like over the last 3 or 4 years you were about 5%. If you looked over the next 5 years, you were showing almost a growth of almost about 20%. Whereas again, and so as a trend, it seems like it's a little bit sort of aggressive. So all I'd say is that as we go back, I realise this is based on what the demographer's given us, but as we go back and look at it as part of that, I think sort of when this was presented, you'd pointed out that perhaps some of the growth at kindergarten now versus at first grade was because now kindergarten was there was no charge for kindergarten, so now people would come in there instead of coming in at first grade. I just encourage, as we go and look at this before we start making major decisions, let's sort of dig into the data to the extent that we can. I just see what look like some anomalies. On the other hand, then what you're saying, which is that this is growing but then Avery's decreasing, that would suggest that across the district perhaps you'd see something that would make sort of more sense, and it's really a case of small samples and where are they ending up.
Right.
And tagging on to what you just said, David, it appears that Hudson is the only school that has some type of capacity, to add more kids. And Bristol will be in the same position that Edgar Road will be in another year. So that's why I asked about the long term versus the short term. Instead of putting $300,000 units in different school grounds, do we have? I think we need to construct some type of long term strategy of how we're going to solve the problem. Because once you get up to 1920 school year, you're really going to be in a fix.
Yeah, knowing that like Mr. Addison observed, the enrollment projections seem to be fairly optimistic in terms of growth, aggressive, I think the word you mentioned, in terms of growth. But that is true, recognize that, but maybe what we do is plan based on the best information we have right now, without committing, because if we wait another year and find out this really is coming and then we don't start planning until then, now we're behind. So we kind of have to get out in front with the planning, assuming that this information is reasonably close to what the actual is going to be. But then if we're actually going to make a decision about adding space somewhere or making some kinds of adjustments, we need to be able to have some more confidence in this data, and that's part of.
I'm not indicating we don't move forward with the modular.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we know that we'll take care of this situation now with this modular.
Right.
What are we going to do in year 2, year 3, and year 4?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
The modular that we're proposing now will buy us some time to figure that out.
And that's the time we need to do some long-term strategy.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, clearly, if you're going to make an error in one direction or the other, you want to provide more capacity than less, because, not least because you can't guarantee where everybody's going to go anyway.
Right.
But at the same time, that's partly why I'm interested to know if we do this and in 5 years down the line, the numbers don't come out where they are. Do we have a way that we can, go and revisit, including perhaps, selling back some of these modular units? And it's good to know that that's an option there.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
John, you want to talk about the Missouri Assessment Partnership?
Yeah, so I sent you some information. As I think most of you are aware, MSIP 6, Missouri School Improvement Plan, has been in a process of revision for some time, being informed by some of the changes at the federal level with the Every Student Succeeds Act. So we, for a little bit of time, work groups have been working on different elements of MSIP 6, which is both process and content standards. It's really obviously a very tricky time in Jeff City right now, for many reasons. One of those reasons has to do with the status of the State Board of Education. Currently, they don't have a quorum, so there's nothing that they can act on. Yeah, so it's an interesting time. So they're certainly not going to be approving any accreditation systems, any changes to the assessment model, but proactively, MASA, the group of administrators, has worked to try and inform some of the things that we're trying to do with accreditation and assessment. In support of that, some local superintendents created a group called MOPE. Doesn't sound great. I think that's the first time I've ever spoken that. But it's the Missouri Assessment Partnership. And the purpose of the partnership, Mike Filton was the one who originally charged it, was to work together as school systems to develop assessment, a proposal for assessment and accreditation that could possibly be used for accreditation and assessment at the state level. Some of the folks started thinking on this and beginning the work and realized the bigness of the situation. And so what they did is they proposed the development of a consortium of school districts to come together and work on this. And so the group would look to make proposals to the state level and possibly ultimately at the federal level request a waiver for use of this particular system. What they have done as of this late fall, early winter is kind of requested to school districts, would you be willing to partner in this assessment consortium? And they have right now, I believe, 50 school districts in the state of Missouri that have agreed to partner. There have been a number of local school districts. Right now, what they're requesting is an initiation fee at $0.25 a student to be a part of the planning and design, initial planning and design phase, which goes from March until June, where they're setting different goals and objectives for the consortium and beginning to look at possible assessments, ideas for assessments, and possible even starting to think through vendors. Following that, they're looking for a greater commitment of $2 per student to be involved. I listed for you some pros and cons, some initial pros and cons for involvement in this assessment consortium. Some of the pros being, I really have a lot of concerns with our current accreditation model and assessment system. So any opportunity to think creatively on a different type of system that is more honoring of our work with kids, that is not as, I think accountability is a really good thing. I think we need to be held to great levels of accountability, but I don't think the current system currently is always recognizing good schools or good districts the way it's designed. I think that the way the system is designed, it punishes districts with not the financial resources that we have personally. So I also like the sharing of the resources that is possible, because if you're a part of a network and you use an assessment system, you know, you could talk about different things that you're doing to inform best practices. Some of my concerns with this are, first of all, that we have begun use of NWEA, which is our Northwest Evaluation, Chris? Assessment system, I think. We begin use of that. We're in our second year. We've been doing a lot of development of training. It's new for teachers. It's not easy for some of them who haven't been using the level of data that you get, and I think we're making a lot of gains. We're able to look at data longitudinally, which is a benefit. And ultimately, if we're a part of this assessment system, while you would have flexibility in pilot stages about which classes or schools participate, ultimately, if it goes to the feds for approval, you would all have to use the same assessment system. And that would be an introduction to teachers, district of something that's brand new, which isn't bad theoretically, but again, if it's a pilot, I don't know if that's the best thing for our students as we're trying to use the current system of assessment. The other thing that I have hesitation, and again, I think accountability needs to be in place for sure. I am uncertain as to whether using an assessment system that's designed to inform learning, the day-to-day instruction of kids in a high-stakes environment is which is best for students and is best for teachers. Because right now we have a system where in April our kids take a test. Certainly at the Fed, all over the country, you're seeing more and more kids back out. You're seeing some districts back out. And a lot of that is kind of what comes with this high-stakes environment. I'm not sure, or I am very weary of any kind of high-stakes system that goes throughout the course of the year. So not just high stakes in April, but high stakes at the beginning of the year. Not as much at the beginning of the year, it's an initial assessment. But if there's high stakes in the middle of the year, and there are high stakes at the end of the year, I personally worry about the climate that creates for both our students and our faculty. I also worry that, certainly ELA and math are extraordinarily important for our kids, that it will have an overemphasis. It sounds bad saying that, but it'll have an overemphasis on those two particular content areas. And it also has the possibility of really, again, these assessment systems, they don't reach the full breadth and scope of our district curricula by their design. They are more like taking that, maybe a few measures in the doctor's office and then making a global assessment, okay? And so once again, if we just narrow what we do in the classroom to this assessment system, I feel it will hinder the full scope of our kids' learning. So for these reasons, what I am kind of proposing, and it's not an action item tonight, because I've met with Matt, I've met with Mike Fulton, I've met with Matt Goodman, is that we join the initiation phase. I have my PD money that I have not used, which would pay for this, our participation, which is about $1,100, which would guarantee us a seat at the table when they're talking through goals and objectives and thinking through some of the initial phases. But it would not require us to be all in for the following year. If it's something where I feel personally that we should strongly consider it, then I would bring together faculty, staff, administrators who would be on the ground with this to give their thoughts regarding whether we should move forward prior to deciding.
I love the idea of having a voice at this point for a nominal amount of money. Can we give you a green light to do that if you want? And just know that you'll come back to us if you think that we really need to go further in looking into what they're going to recommend.
Yeah. You probably could. There's a memo of understanding that they've created.
And do we need to sign off on that?
I've asked them, I haven't heard back yet.
Okay.
And they're still trying to figure this all out themselves. Mike's got a pretty big job. Matt's trying to work on it, so I've asked them, and because what they've said too is the memo of understanding doesn't have like you are legally obligated to have your teachers do. There's no like we can back out at any point. They're like anytime you want to back out, you can back out. So I don't know whether I have to sign the memo of understanding. I'm guessing if we're going to financially commit that we might have to, which is something that the board would endorse. And so I don't have that for you today because I wasn't prepared, but I don't think because the work doesn't take place until March, I could present the memo of understanding at the February and just tell them that it's a very simple, like a 2-paragraph. It's nothing too extreme.
Arnold.
So have they floated some of these ideas by the feds to just kind of see what the waters are looking like? Because when you get a waiver, you've got to jump through a whole bunch of hoops.
They have. There are some different school districts or states that have requested a waiver. Mike referenced Nebraska has initiated a waiver as a state. They are using NWEA, the assessment system we use, that apparently is creating a summative assessment. It's not a part of their regular offering for the state of Nebraska. So they do feel like it is possible. It's possible, but again, with some of the turmoil, like with our state level, and have to have the involvement, they don't know when, but they do feel that it's it's possible.
In our current, the NWEA we use now, the curriculum, it models off our curriculum, correct?
Our curriculum is aligned to the state standards, and the NWEA is aligned to the state standards.
Okay.
Yeah. So when the kids take the assessment, it's not like they're getting the full scope of our curriculum, but they're getting a representative of our.
Sampling.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm a little bit weary of, you know, again, I don't want to narrow what our kids are learning. And we're finding great value in this. So anyway, that's why I just kind of want to learn a little bit more.
All right, I think that sounds like a
Okay.
good approach. All right, Dr. Dendo, what in the world is a seal of biliteracy?
So tonight I would like to present a program that was instituted at the state level, adopted at the state level late 2017. And school districts are in the process of looking into it and making a choice on whether to adopt the Missouri Seal of Biliteracy. So this is a program that, like I said, is new to Missouri, but it has been a program that's been in place throughout the United States for many years. And Missouri is, we're happy that Missouri has joined the national ranks. The focus of the program is really to promote active participation by having our students become biliterate throughout their education and celebrating that. And so there are really two components. It's for those native English-speaking students who develop proficiency in a secondary language. And it also focuses on students where English is the second language and they have another native language. And so English, they determine and they can show proficiency in English. So it's recognizing both groups of students for that. There's three components to the program. The first component, like I said, is for students showing proficiency in English. For native English speakers, that would be determined through whether or not they scored a proficient or advanced rating on the English 2 EOC, which is taken during their sophomore year. For ELL students where English is their second language, it is determined through a high score on the ELL access exam. So that's the first component. The second component is students showing proficiency in a second language. So for both native English speakers and ELL students, that would be measured either through an appropriately leveled score on the Avant stamp, which is standards-based measurement of proficiency, or the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, AAPPL, lots of acronyms, assessment exam. If they met level of proficiency on either one of those exams, those would be considered proficient in that second language. They were open to having students put together a portfolio to prove the proficiency if there isn't a standardized exam available for a language that they might have proficiency in. And so there's only a limited number of languages that either one of those tests show proficiency in. So if a student can put together a portfolio that shows that they're proficient in a language outside of that, they will accept that as well. And it is also available for students who show proficiency in American Sign Language. So students, it's a wide range. The state is very open to anything that the students can show proficiency in the second language. The third component is students must demonstrate good behavior, good attendance, and social cultural competence. And when you look at social cultural competence, that is left up to the discretion of the districts to determine that, but here are some examples of what a student could show, they can show that they have volunteered with translation assisting services for the community organization. They've been part of a community service project that utilizes both languages that they are proficient in, that they are actively participating in multicultural activities throughout the community, or participation in a world language club. Those are just examples. So I've been talking with the administrators at the high school, as well as Brent Mackey, who's the department chair of the world language department at the high school. Very excited about this opportunity for our children to be a part of this program. Wanted to talk about what does this recognition mean. First of all, there would actually be a seal on the student's diploma that would be recognized that as a seal of biliteracy, that the student has shown that they are biliterate. It would also have a designation on their student's transcript. And the gentleman who is in charge of this program at the DESE is working with different universities throughout the state to have them endorse this program. And he has had several sign off and endorse this program so far. And with that endorsement, what the universities are promising is 12 hours of college credit in world languages for students who have met this designation, which is a huge benefit for some of our students. He's confident that he'll have more and more universities sign off on that as the program continues to grow. In addition, he has a number of employers, Ameren as an example, who have endorsed this program as well because they are wanting their names behind this program because they recognize the need for a biliterate workforce. So these are all the things that could benefit our students. So the first step that needs to occur is I've attached in the documents a resolution that I worked drafted and worked with Brent and the administration on. If the school board feels that this is a program that we should move forward with, the first step is that the school board needs to adopt this resolution. Then I take that resolution along with our draft procedures that we've been working with the world language department on and make application to the state that we do want to be a part of this program. So this is the first step in moving forward.
So who's requesting the resolution?
It's DESE and it's this program. So this is, you have to have the school board adopt a resolution that
In order to
behind this
participate.
in order to participate.
Currently, how many students do we have that have English as a second language? Do you know?
That's a good question. I'm not sure the exact number, but I can get that number for you. We have one teacher throughout K through 12 who works with all of our ELL students, and I believe she has a part-time assistant that helps her. John, do you know?
35 to 40 students.
Okay. I know some districts have a lot more than we do.
And if we adopt this now, this would be in place for our current graduating seniors. Now, we haven't had time to really advertise it, and we would work with what the seniors that would naturally fall into this category anyway. In talking with the gentleman, when, for instance, when the state of New York adopted this program, in the entire state of New York, only 60 students met the criteria. And then the next year, 3,600. It just tends to grow exponentially once people know about it and learn about it and see the benefits of it.
Well, I guess that goes to my question, how will we actively, solicit the kids to participate in this program?
Right.
And then I guess, do we have any idea now how many might be interested?
Yeah, I've talked with Brent about that. He, as far as looking at the students who could possibly take advantage of this right now, he and I would work together to see if any of the seniors naturally have these components already. The social cultural component is probably the one thing that has, because it hasn't been advertised, so we would work to see if there's something that we could do to help meet the needs of the students at this moment, given the short time frame, because we don't want to hold anything against them. One of the things that they could write to demonstrate socio-cultural competence is an essay rather than about the importance of having dual language proficiency. So that's something that they could do in a short time frame versus being part of a club for 2 years, since it is just being adopted right now. And the state only really adopted it at the state level in late 2017.
So is this something we'll help our students to prepare for? To, I guess, guide them in getting the skills they need to receive this designation?
This would be a framework that would definitely be something that we could present to students who are interested in starting a language with, yes.
The pathway to biliteracy, how does that work and what does that entail?
That is something that the state recommends that we look at doing. There's nothing formal from the state level as far as formal requirements, and so that again is left up to the districts to determine that. So they suggested, for instance, creating some sort of kind of pathways award for students who might be leaving the middle school, who have participated in some language classes at the middle school, or natural cutoffs throughout K-12. So that's something that we can develop along the way.
So first of all, I think this is a great thing because I think foreign language is incredibly important. But is this assuming that, do you think if someone takes 4 years of a language, assuming they do well in it, are these tests passable? Or is this going to be for kids that have done extra work? Or
The way
any
I
thoughts on
understand
that?
it, they feel that if you have gone through the sequence in school,
Okay.
it should be something that's passable. And then we also have students who, through their family circumstances, or they've traveled, or they just have other opportunities that they are bilingual
Right, they're
through,
proficient.
outside of school itself, and so it's recognizing that ability as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Would because of the gray area regarding the pathway to biliteracy awards, would it be better if we do decide to adopt this and make this resolution, instead of will be established, it's may be established? Because that way we're not committed to doing it if we don't necessarily think that that's a step that we want to take, or there's not enough guidance from the state level to, is that a possibility to consider it as a maybe thing?
Would it be accepted?
Yeah, because it's not a requirement, it was one of those pathway awards were just suggested.
Both of my kids took Latin, which is one of those weird languages. How are you fluent in a language you can't speak? So how does it qualify or fit into this whole program?
I would have to check on that to see what assessments are there, or again, it goes to that portfolio somehow showing that you are proficient in a language, because there's only certain world languages that have a standardized assessment out there. And so the state is so open to wanting to promote this program. In other states who have had this program for a number of years, they, like I said, they do American Sign Language. They will allow proof of proficiency in a tribal language of a country outside of the United States. Anything that shows that you are bilingual, that you have a dual language. Including that.
My last statement is, I'm all for this program. I know how we measure the achievement of all of our students, including our subgroups. And I like to hope to see something specific, to help all kids move towards this designation.
And the communication, rolling that out to the younger levels too, so as electives are considered, that this may be something that even kids moving from the elementary to the middle school levels could consider that as well down the road.
All right, so at this point, if there are no further questions, I believe we need a motion to approve the seal of biliteracy, a copy of which is in your board packet.
I move that we approve the resolution with one slight edit to change the word will to the word may in the sentence about pathway to biliteracy awards.
Second.
Okay, I'd like to propose a further amendment, which is on the second bullet, I believe it should be, whereas developing a child's home language is a strong foundation for academic literacy in English rather than on English.
Good catch.
Ironic.
And Amy, is the language for the actual last paragraph resolution correct? That
I
the-
hereby certify. that
Therefore be it resolved by the governing board of the Webster Grove School District, approve the seal of biliteracy effective immediately. It seems like there's a word missing there. That the governing board
No, therefore be it
approves.
resolved. Yeah. It should be approves the seal of biliteracy effective immediately.
Or approves, yes.
Yeah.
That the governing board, so there's also some slight language tweaks there that we authorize you
Make those
to make.
changes and then I can get them to you to sign.
Well, I think we need to get it in the minutes, though, what
Yeah.
we actually are approving. So Sherry, do you want to read it back?
Yes. So I have the second bullet as in English, literacy in English. Pathway to biliteracy awards may be established. And what was the last one?
The very last paragraph, I hereby certify the foregoing to be a full, true, and correct resolution.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
It's the one above.
The one above that. Now
Therefore-
therefore be it resolved by the governing board of the Webster Grove School District, Webster Grove, Missouri.
I think it should be that instead of by. Now therefore be resolved that the
That-
governing board approves the seal of biliteracy effective
Yes,
immediately.
thank you.
So that instead of by.
And then approves instead of approved.
You got it?
So that instead of by and approves versus approved.
Yes.
Got
Yeah.
it.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so I believe we have a motion, and do we have a second on the amended motion that David made?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you with my literacy skills.
Okay.
Spell check wouldn't have worked on either one of those.
No, actually. Steger and Hickson building schedules, Dr. Fields and Dr. Lee. And Chris?
Well, I was just going to introduce Dr. Howard Fields and Dr. Grace Lee, who will present the changes to the Steger and the Hickson schedules for the 2018-19 school year.
All right.
Or do you need one of those little?
And Chris, this is a point of clarification. You're saying, are these proposed changes or are these changes that have been put in place?
These are changes that Dr. Fields and Dr. Lee have worked with their staff to put in place for the next school year. So the changes are proposed for the 2018-2019 school year.
Since you raised that question, David, I'd just like to add a point of clarification that the board does not approve things such as which electives are to be offered in a particular school year. Because this issue has generated a fair amount of discussion and interest in the community, we thought it would be, Emerson and I thought it would be beneficial to have Dr. Fields and Dr. Lee present what they intend to implement next school year and give us an opportunity to ask questions. And if there's anything we would like them to further reflect upon, we can certainly do that. But there will be no motions.
Certainly, I understood that, and I think sort of more broadly, yeah. I mean, I think sort of come to the board, and I think sort of more broadly, it would behoove the board potentially to sort of go and. There may be issues raised that the board should go away and think about in more detail. Let me put it that way.
I don't know that the board's going to go away and think about it.
Well, no, not in relation to this, but in relation to, are there policy issues that the board believes, that we should be rethinking from a policy standpoint?
Like generally big picture, future agenda items? I'm not sure where you're going.
So to the extent that, and I don't want to sort of prejudge what's going on, but I mean to the extent that we think there are certain things that should be core and are very important to what is being done, and if we believe that needs a greater emphasis, the board should think about going away and thinking about that. So what emphasis do we believe should be placed on music, for instance?
I actually think that if we have thoughts or feedback on that issue, that would be something that we would share with Dr. Simpson and say, this is an area of interest and concern for the board. Please reflect upon it and communicate with your staff about it and come back to us.
Okay.
That's how I believe that should be.
Okay.
Sorry, guys, for all of that.
You're fine.
Stealing your thunder.
Oh, no thunder at all. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Simpson, community, and colleagues. My name is Howard Fields, and I am the proud principal at Steger, as well as the Webster Groves Elementary Computer School. I stand before you very excited to deliver and present some of the additional opportunities we have for our students. With that being the case, we believe that these changes and these amendments will provide an opportunity for us as a school community to get closer to our mission and vision statement. Now, when I say mission and vision statement as a newbie into the district, the mission and vision statement has always been almost like scripture from the standpoint of we want to make sure all of our decisions are as aligned as best as possible. So what you see in front of you, that is the Webster Groves mission and vision, and that is something that is put in front of our community, our staff, everyone once they come into Steger as well as the computer school, so we can make sure all decisions are aligned with that. In addition to that, I was very excited to learn that we are taking equity so serious, and I believe that those changes will, in essence, help us move closer to those three documents. Now, the first month that I was on the job, which was July 2017, the first thing I had an opportunity to do was open up the schedule and provide an open agenda for individual staff members to come in and meet with myself. We didn't have an agenda item. We just really discussed and learned a lot about kids and some other pieces, but one thing that emerged had to do with some staff concerns. As we always try to do what I call do better than our best and look for the next opportunity for growth, there were a few concerns that was brought up. With that being the case, what you have in front of you, some of those concerns had to do with student performance, specifically related to proficiency levels and performance disparities. Schedule, those of us that are not familiar with computer school as well as Steger, there are two very unique situations, two staffs, and they remind us that frequently that we're running two different schools. What's great for one school may not necessarily be great for the other. So juggling those particular concerns, and then lastly, the school for today being very excited about the report, but how do we make it more practical through the implementation. So when we look at the mission vision, our equity resolution, and looking at some of these concerns coming right in, we began to have conversations. And I knew if you haven't got an opportunity to read this particular article related to why a school's master schedule is a powerful enabler of change, I would certainly have you read that. Again, it will provide some context with regards to some of the things we can do strategically to provide our students with additional options. So after those meetings, we began to have conversations as an administrative team as it relates to soliciting members for our leadership team. And one of the taglines we use, come to the leadership team, where we will look at the schedule that we continue to bring up. The reason why I mentioned schedule, with those conversations, we wanted more opportunities for our staff members to meet and discuss a lot of different things related to students. Currently, the structure that we had in place, you only get a chance to speak as a department or as a team once a month. And having critical conversations with the team, that was not enough if we wanted to get closer to the shared commitments that we have both as a staff as well as a district. So again, in July 2017, we had those one-on-ones, and then we moved into Operation 1819 schedule. And what that really entailed, with the leadership team, we got together and we began to just formulate thought processes in terms of what would an ideal schedule consist of. We received a lot of feedback, and we tried to put all of that in the draft 1819 schedule, which had the nickname of Pinata. The reason why we put it out there in that magnitude, we wanted it to get beat up. We wanted critical feedback. We wanted you to strip it down, all of that, so we can elicit some feedback. Now, unfortunately, that particular schedule did get out, and that was not the intent, nor was it supposed to be the final draft. But again, we did get a lot of feedback from that, and then we went back to the board in October 2017. As a leadership team, we discussed all of those particular changes, and we had some non-negotiables. And with regards to the non-negotiables that were established by the leadership team, an example of a non-negotiable was as follows. As it pertains to a computer school, it was a non-negotiable for them to be able to collaborate as an entire school to continue to strengthen the current practices that were going on in the building. Currently, we have one section of each, and they do not get an opportunity to sit down as an entire team to talk about best practices. And as you can imagine, only being the only 4th or 5th grade teacher, that could be somewhat difficult. In addition to that, we spoke with our current staff at Steger. They wanted to continue with the current structure that we have with regards to the teams. and a few other pieces. So with that being the case, in October 2017, we had the Build Your Own Schedule opportunity. If you were a member of the leadership team, you were given complete autonomy to create whatever schedule you believe would be best suited for our school. But the only stipulation, you must have a situation where computer school could plan together, and we must have opportunities for both department meetings as well as team meetings to occur once a week. From that, in November, we took all of that feedback back to the leadership team for a second time to provide some feedback and receive that feedback and make some additional changes. From there, we completed the quote-unquote final draft in January 2018, had an opportunity to present to the CCC this month, and then now we are here to present this information to yourself.
The CCC?
Yes.
Curriculum Coordinating
Committee. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was a little confused when I first heard of it too. So, part of the research that took place in this lengthy process had to do with looking at other options for sixth grade students in our community. One thing I learned coming into Webster Groves, we like to see what's going on in other places, and I think that helps us with best practice. In this particular instance, we wanted to know what other sixth grade students were receiving in the form of elective classes. Just being candid, the reason why that was the case, we never had an issue per se with the time portion of the schedule. Most of the conversation were geared towards elective options. So again, the time constraints that we put into place, that was never a heavy topic. It was more so, what should we offer our sixth grade students? Should they get a choice? How do we make that happen? So what you can see on the screens in front or in back of you, you will see various different schools that have sixth grade students, and then the options that they have based on the 17-18 school year. The next item has to do with this particular year, your options for elective coming into sixth grade. You can pick between band, orchestra, music, explo, as well as choir, and currently that structure, you will receive that every single day for 35 minutes. As we are all huge advocates for collaboration, we were able to get strategic in our practices and provide the proposed for 18-19 school year, which will continue with the band, orchestra, music, and choir, but those minutes have increased from 35 minutes up to 50 minutes. It's no secret that our music program does a spectacular job, and we wanted to provide scholars with opportunities to continue to strengthen their craft. However, working collaboratively with members of our team, including Dr. Grace and her leadership, we were able to provide what's called an Explo Wheel. With this Explo Wheel, classes would include drama, world language, art and design, as well as computer science. Out of those, art would be mandatory due to the fact that we want to make sure we continue to accommodate DESE required minutes. The current structure at Steger, we have 4 teams. What we are proposing, the 4th team or one of the 4 teams will be consistent of the Explo Wheel. So that would be tops 88 students who would receive the Explo Wheel. In the event that we had more than 88 students, we would then go to a lottery-based system as we go through this pilot opportunity.
Quick question, are you saying that all the kids who select the Explo Wheel would be placed on the same team?
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason why that's the perfect segue, in order for all of this to occur, what you have right now is the latest version of our schedule, and the reason why we wanted to highlight this, there's a difference between the specials as well as the elective. We will talk about that momentarily. 50 minutes for your core classes. You have ELA, science, American history, as well as math. You will have your specials followed by elective. An additional change, lunch recess was originally 40 minutes. We are increasing that to 50 minutes so it can have the consistency throughout the schedule. So 25 minutes for lunch, 25 minutes for recess, which is an increase of 5 minutes for each. And then you also see the opportunity for the entire computer school, which is on the right side, for them to have their non-negotiable, which is time for them to plan together. Now, as it pertains to specials versus elective, currently, if you look at the bottom for the elective, you have band, choir, orchestra, and music, Explo. For the 3 teams that will have band, choir, orchestra, and music, Explo, their specials will consist of PE, library, as well as art. The change has been with the Explo wheel. If you have the Explo wheel, which is art and design, computer science, world language, as well as drama, then your specials will be PE, library, as well as music, so we can continue to accommodate the DESE required minutes.
Is that music exploration or a different kind of music, different music class?
It's music exploration. However, we are willing to sit down and continue the conversation with our music department to see, are there opportunities for some choir, are there other opportunities, but that is pretty much open.
Right now it's music exploration.
Yeah.
Okay.
As we continue, you'll see the final breakdown. You have the current 17-18 school year schedule, followed by the first Pinata version, and then the subsequent version 2 that we have. Any questions?
I appreciate the input that was given. How was that input given from staff, and what kind and to what level?
We had a lot of different opportunities. We had a staff meeting where everyone could just really shout out, have conversations. We had an opportunity to provide surveys so we can get that anecdotal type of information, so we can sit down, go back to the leadership team and discuss what those particular pieces were, lay all the cards on the table, and then continue to have ongoing conversations. A lot of staff members felt comfortable coming one-on-one to have conversations or going to a leadership team member.
On the typical day, I know on the, it sounds like on the, if you're on the, I guess I could call it the Explo team, would that be a fair?
Yes.
What if there are fewer than 88 kids who, do you sign up for this thing?
Yes.
How do you do that?
You would sign up. The process that's already put in place, normally students will select their music selection, and that's how they were placed on a team. We just added an Explo wheel for this particular year. Now, if it was less than 88 students, then we would go back and have the conversation strategically. Do we attach music Explo students, et cetera? But based on the preliminary numbers, we don't believe that's going to be the case.
Okay. And is this going to have an increased number of staff, or are you using existing staff, or?
We have been very strategic. There is no add-on to the FTE position, part-time position, et cetera. Now, if Dr. Wiley wanted to make that happen, we can certainly discuss that. But at this particular time, we're not having any additional staff to make this happen. So, for instance, we are working with Hickson strategically for them to provide world language as well as a drama person, and then our art person, based off the feedback that we had, she wanted to move into a situation with her studio, provide art instruction, and go above what she was able to provide. So that's just some of the strategic opportunities we provided to make this possible.
Okay, and I know, I think Steger and Waynesville are the only 6th grade centers in the state. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know.
I know, looking at those comparisons of those offerings, I guess elective offerings, and then in comparison with what I would call pure middle school models, Kirkwood and Sparing and Melville. I guess it may be a philosophical thing for the district that we have 1 foot in elementary and 1 foot in middle school, and we straddle the middle with Steger 6th grade center. And whether it would be more effective to actually set up Steger like a middle school, which would allow for a lot more flexibility than keeping it like a quasi-middle school, elementary school, and try to force a round peg into a square hole.
Understandable. Electives, when we first started this process of electives and options, they were not even on the radar. However, continuing to have conversations and through the Pinata schedule, many staff members that are currently there began to have questions about, well, can we do this, can we do that? I still didn't know if it was prevalent amongst our whole entire community, so we sent that information out to students as well as staff members as well as parents related to what are your thoughts on additional elective options for 6th grade students. And it was at that particular time that students in our community spoke in terms of not only do we want that, you should look at these particular options. And when I say these particular, drama as well as foreign language, they were continued to be referenced more than anything.
Yeah,
I would
think
agree with you, Arnold.
that's something we
I-
really need to think about,
Yeah.
because middle school, if we really want it to act like a middle school, or
Yeah.
have middle school options, then we need to set it up like one and staff it like one. And that will probably cost a little bit extra money to do that. But that's just something for some discussion down the road. One of the things I'm glad to see that the staff concerns were that student performance was number one, and hopefully these are listed in some kind of chronological or order of importance, that school proficiency level and performance disparities. I know there's been some conversation about, you know, the arts and things like that, and I know that we have like an ELA and a math and a science and a social studies person who kind of directs some curriculum or some things like that, or oversees. And I thought that there was somebody for the arts at one time, and I don't know if that is still, or...
You mean a curriculum coordinator?
Yeah, and there used to be like who kind of oversees a little bit, who kind of helps direct some things, like for, because right now really like fine arts and visual arts, they're kind of on their own. But if you're talking about ELA, then there's somebody that you can go to for ELA, there's somebody for math you can talk to for math.
We were one of the few districts that had a fine arts coordinator at Grooms, and he was a casualty of the Prop S, Prop W failure. Yeah, and he was only part-time. I mean, he was only maybe 0.4, but he did serve in kind of that organizational, you know, role with the folks. And his expertise was not, I mean, it was mainly drama, creative, some of the other different arts, but.
And that may have helped alleviate some of the disruptiveness that, you know, some of the things that we've read and heard and things like that. And I'm not advocating for a particular person or position or something like that, but I think the communication of those things with a broader group, or somebody who may have a representation of how that works up and down, may be a beneficial thing to kind of look at down the road or think about. And are these going to be specific Explo options here? Do we know that these are the options that kids are going to have to take?
At the moment, yes. The only thing that would change, it is a byproduct of Hickson and their numbers. So as we look at those particular options, again, I can't say for certain until everything is signed, sealed, and delivered, but at this particular time, we do feel comfortable with those course options.
Okay, and I know, because I know you well enough to know what I'm going to say is true, that the decisions you make are what's best for kids. And I know you well enough to know that.
That's the easiest part of the job for me.
I know that. I think how we communicate things sometimes, it's observation, and how we approach delving into areas that have never been delved into before, and understanding everybody has a turf that they want to uphold and defend, making sure that there's a real good sit down and a real good communication and a meeting of the minds and an agreement before stuff gets pushed out. I think that gives the community and our parents and our students a lot more confidence in what our administration's doing and what we are doing as a board. So I would really encourage those discussions to continue to be ongoing and to have happened where both parties could stand up and say, yeah, this is what we think, this is great. Yeah. Because I think we all want what's best for kids, and it's unfortunately there's a limited amount of time and a lot of things, irons in the fire, and it's which irons do we want to keep hot? Obviously the 4 content areas, but everybody else, if I'm an art teacher, I think art's important. If I'm a music teacher, I think music is important. If I'm a PE teacher, I think that's important. And I happen to be the former band director, so I love that. So I think communication is critical in these kinds of changes. And I know we've done changes like this that have taken over a year to take a look at and sit back and put on the back burner and then bring back out and talk about. So just some observations from my end on that.
I think it's critical to have people contribute their thoughts and ideas and voice to it. In an ideal setting, it's all of us agreeing on decisions, and ultimately, it doesn't always happen that way. It's great if it does. So I think it's important. I agree with you. Communication is important. Contributing thoughts and ideas are important as well. Sometimes administrators have to make decisions. Like Howard said, I go to bed at night comfortable. I struggle to sleep sometimes, but it's not because I worry that a decision I made wasn't in the best interest of what I thought was kids. Knowing that may be disagreement from what John M. thinks is what's best interest for kids. And so I think those are words to continue to think about, and we could always improve. I do.
David?
So just question first. So what happens if you get 176 kids who want to do this? Are you going to run 2 sections, and how are you going to deal with that?
No, currently the option that we have is going to a lottery-based system for this first year and provide names of 88 students that we would have someone pick those names. You can certainly do that, and then we would go from there. But again, this is the first opportunity for this pilot year, and we don't want to go over that 88 so that we can then make subsequent decisions moving forward. So for the 1920 school year, et cetera. Myself and Mr. Williams, who's done a fascinating job with the music program, we've already begun those conversations in terms of how we can still provide the more traditional opportunity for students to select a particular music course, but still provide an opportunity based off the feedback we've gotten from our community with some other options that they will foresee once they go to Hickson. So.
And it's just during the first period of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So Grace was able to work with it to have the teachers come over for the first period of the day.
I just wondered how.
Okay.
I was going to say, all right. So I think historically in Webster, so obviously we've seen what the core subjects are, and if we haven't placed music on quite that pedestal, we've come pretty close. So can you just sort of speak to that, and where do you see music coming in terms of, should it be on that same pedestal, or should we be sort of moving and thinking about things differently?
I think for me, going always back to the mission and vision opportunity, I think the music program is extremely vital to our scholars. I think that's evident and based off a lot of different things that are going on. I mean, the music program, getting a chance to present at Carnegie Hall and all of that, I think that speaks to the level of importance. But also look for opportunities as we get students and our community members ready for a world that we don't necessarily know they will encounter. So that may be looking at other opportunities for them to be engaged. I believe they both can coexist. I just think we have to go through that process, and sometimes a very messy process, to make sure we get it right.
And just one other thing. So I think the thing that I've heard more often than anything from anybody else in terms of if you were to go and do something else sooner, it's foreign language. And so, if I was sort of looking at this and going back and looking and saying what are the core fundamentals, if I was going to do that, I would think that if there was a way to elevate foreign languages up, if I think about it, whilst choice is good and choice is a wonderful thing, I think at some point also, because you are the one who's fulfilling the mission that we have, it may be more important, in fact, that we go and tell students, not necessarily giving as much choice at this level, saying these are things that are going to fundamentally be good for you, and perhaps making finding a way to accelerate foreign language. As I think, yes, I mean, drama is wonderful if we can do that. But if you wanted me to ask, what do I think is going to help our kids? If we can have more of our kids, and especially more of our at-risk kids, be exposed to a foreign language sooner, I truly think that's going to help more of them achieve their potential.
I agree. I would also throw computer science in there just based off what I know about MSIP 5 and the preliminary things coming out of MSIP 6. That will certainly give students an opportunity for their post-secondary option to go through some different components. So I would add computer science to that, but I do concur.
David, I would also say that, that's one of the things why you'll find many middle school programs, they offer these exploratories. So they give kids a place to figure out what they want to explore, give them a taste of different programs, so that we can say, well, here's a path for me. Because you're going to learn, there's research behind music, there's research behind, but So I agree with you on the foreign language piece, but that's why a lot of these sixth grade, and again, we don't have the staff for it, we don't have the structure for it currently, but there's a lot of explos at a lot of these schools where they get, you know, these tastes of these different things, along with possibly a core experience like a music program, you know. So it's, you know, there's arguments for a lot of different contents.
And so really, so the comment that I made at the very beginning, which is as a board and as we are sort of instructing you in terms of what we think the priorities should be, and then asking you to go and implement them, and Amy's entirely right, that's the way it should be, and I apologise for suggesting differently. But as we have that sort of that higher level conversation, where do we think as a board those priorities should lie, such that you can then, and your staff can administer, can put those into place. I just think would be a valuable conversation. It's certainly one we've had, I think, as a board in the past, but I think it's one that would be valuable to revisit again.
Jane. Well, I'd like to commend both Howard and Grace for being willing to shake things up in the interest of offering kids more personalized learning. I think that's what this really is doing, helping them discover what they might be interested in a little bit earlier. One minor point was the computer school is now going to have electives, and I'd hope that the other principals would look at...
You mean Steger?
No, computer school.
Not yet.
Well, it's kind of in there that they're looking there. And I like the idea of elementary school students.
I didn't see that at all in there.
Well, she's right. She saw something that's accurate on one of the slides, but that was a discussion point, but at this point, they're just going to get that hour specials. But I would love it. I would love it.
And that major point was due to the fact that we were speaking with the music department. I think it would be a tremendous thing for our even 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students to be able to be introduced to band and some of the things that we have going on. Looking at the staffing, we will continue to look for those options, but we do believe there's an opportunity for computer school as we, not being biased, try to separate ourselves a little bit more from some of the other elementary schools. I think that is certainly an option. And then you spoke to the piece about shaking it up. Just to be quite honest with you, Jane, this wasn't even on my radar in terms of schedule, electives, etc. But as we continue to serve and listening to the community, listening to our staff members, then I have an obligation, myself and Mr. Atterbury specifically at Steger, to move forward and see would there be a possible way to bring some of those things to light. So I do appreciate it.
Thank you. And could I ask what Joe's views would be? Would this be a really popular option with people you went to Steger with?
I think so, yeah. Anytime that you can offer more electives and choices, I think is probably a positive. I think maybe it might be hard for some kids to choose, in between the choir, band, and orchestra and drama and world languages and stuff like that. Because I know personally I might want to get a head start on the language stuff, but overall, I think it would be received very well. Yeah, it would be popular.
I like the collaboration between Hickson and Steger. I think that's great. That's a good start to actually looking at a middle school, especially if the administrations are working together. That's a big plus.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you right now up front, I'm an unabashed music person. When I hit 7th grade, we did K through 6 at elementary, but when I hit 7th grade, I had music every year. I was a vocal music guy, I was all that. But I can tell you that having been a student in there and also having been a parent, I've also seen a fair number of kids that if you force them into an area that they're just, whether it's a performance area or something like that, as much as I would love to say music is right up there with the core courses, I'm just never going to quite get there as close as I am with world language, things like that, because I have a lot of friends who, quite frankly, I can't understand why they don't appreciate music more than they do. They don't enjoy it. It's just, they would rather have quiet time than something going on, whereas I would have music playing all day if I could, just because that's my thing. A lot of people go to art museums. I can't draw a stick figure well. Do I like going to an art museum now and then? Absolutely. But again, it's not there. I want people to have an appreciation for it, maybe even more so than what I have. But I think the thing that through this process, while not emphasizing too much about it, I'm a little bit disappointed at the fact that some of this information got out there and created a whole lot of undue stress in our community way ahead of time. And am extremely disappointed that some people took it upon themselves to do that, because I think that undermined the process along the way. Maybe it took the opportunity for people to then come back and say, here's what I say. Maybe that was their impetus to come back and say, I would like you to consider these things. And that's welcome. And I appreciate the fact that you guys have been welcome to do that. But I think those through that process, that created the masking of I don't have an opportunity to talk about it, was masked really over the real reason was they're not agreeing with me. And there's a difference between people being heard and other people understanding them and then going to agreement as well. If you're not agreeing with me, sometimes the thing I want to say is, you don't understand. No, I understand, I just don't agree with you. And at some point in time, I think we got to that in some avenues, and I'm disappointed by that. I like the fact that those who do want to jump in are getting actually more minutes to do it. If that's what they want to do, they're getting more. And that's fantastic. I think that's awesome. And I think I agree wholeheartedly with, I think the general feeling around here is that we are, a lot of things that we're considering pushing more down is good. There's so many things that happen in our society that need to be pushed more down. The kids are exposed to a lot more, and I think their exposure to world languages and things like that at a younger level is fantastic. I don't think there can be anything but good things happen for that. So in general, I'm excited about what you've considered here, and I think you're going to have a lot more than 88 that want to do that sort of thing.
To your point about information getting out, type of personality I have is just an opportunity to reflect. There are some pieces that was, I want to say, like 2 months on the job, so I don't believe there was a malicious intent in any of that, but we've had an opportunity to continue to move forward and have those conversations, and based off those conversations, we've learned a thing or two more so about the community as well as opportunity for kids. So again, this is an ongoing process. We've continued to have those conversations, and we're, again, opening it back up with what I stated. We're excited for the opportunities our students will be able to have.
And I agree, Howard, completely, that holding a grudge about that would not be productive for anyone. It's a matter of moving on from that and say, what can we take from that experience, improve what we did along the way, and maybe have a learning experience for all those that were involved in those situations, whether they be more positive spins or maybe the negatives that have to be turned around as an improvement opportunity. So.
Over the years, I've been very critical about Webster and change. I've been very reluctant to do it. But change brings opportunities. We won't see them unless we have a willing mind and a willing heart to try something out to change it.
And it's not permanent. It's not forever. This is, we'll see how it goes. Sorry.
I just was going to say, I hope at the 5th grade level that when these options are presented, it doesn't turn into a financial decision, so that kids are aware if they really want to play a trumpet, that there's a way for that to happen, that they don't sign up for Expo because there's no cost involved.
Mr. Reeves and his team, they do an outstanding job of providing that information to scholars. And as we move forward, it was a wild idea. I don't even know the budget impact, but will there be opportunities for us to own some of that, some of those band pieces and instruments, so we can rent those out and we can continue to provide scholars with opportunities? Because again, I'm a music guy myself. We certainly want to give them opportunities. This is a fascinating community for music. We just want to also provide other opportunities and tastes, for lack of better terms, for students.
Absolutely.
Again, really?
Yeah. I actually just an aside. Thank you for finding some more time for lunch and recess.
Yeah.
No, seriously. I mean, another one of the things that I hear all the time is that everybody has to rush through lunch and recess all the time. So the fact that you can even find a few more minutes there to do that, it seems like it's certainly addressing something that I've heard a lot.
I agree.
Absolutely.
And those,
thank you.
The one thing I'm happy about the team, those minutes did not come at the expense of core instruction. So what we did, we had an opportunity to eliminate 2 passing periods. We had some other things we looked at. So again, all of those minutes are not just for cutting all of our cores down to 45 minutes or anything like that.
No, I just did. So good.
Arnold,
So-
again, seriously?
So what's your vision for this in the, I gotta get my school years right here, 1920 school year?
In an ideal sense, I think the opportunity for trimester rotations provide a taste. And for those students who don't get a chance to sign up for band, they still get an opportunity to experience music through a trimester or something like that. And for those students who want to continue and do spectacular jobs with music, they will have that opportunity to take it as the elective. So again, we do want to provide taste. Now that's going to only occur if we can look at some staffing, but for right now, continuing to move forward and go from there.
So right now, when they sign up for these, it will be, they will choose one of these and they'll have that the whole year? Is that how that
Yes,
works?
but the rotation for the expo will be a trimester based.
Trimester, okay. And the team and department time, this is piggybacking off of Mr. Addison's comment, that's a very valuable thing. And I would expect that the academics and what the staff picked as their number one thing, the improvement of what's going on would improve. Because, and I made this comment before, that I know we have great staffing and we have excellent staff. We're somehow trying to figure out, and low class size, how to figure out how to really make sure all students have success. And I would probably be against Explo at elementary school for that simple reason. If we were like doing great and computer school actually is doing fine, from my perspective, it's always room for improvement, but that's the number one priority that parents expect their kids to get, the very, very best education that we can provide, and we're still tweaking that. And that's all I'll say.
With the increased time, we'll be able to strategically provide conversations in forums like this about particular students and systematic pieces that we're very excited about.
That will be very good.
Don't forget about Grace.
Well, I was going to actually, and she may, this might be an opportunity for her to chime in as well. My feedback is, first of all, I appreciate and respect your willingness to take on change in a district where that isn't always an easy thing to do.
Thank you.
I respect your professional judgment, and I have no doubt that you are making decisions in the best interests of kids. You wouldn't be here if that weren't the case. To give you a little bit of tough love, and you've heard both Arnold and Steve talked about the communication piece of it, and the communication leading up to this decision. I would ask that, I have a sixth grader, well, incoming sixth grader, so I attended the orientation. And I left feeling not nearly as comfortable as I do tonight, specifically around a couple of issues. One, the difference between the electives and the specials. When I look at this that you presented, where I see that regardless of what they choose, they're going to have PE, music, and art, all kids are going to have some form of that. I think that would be reassuring to parents to realize that, because I didn't get that before. And then the other piece that I think could use some clarification is the connection between Steger and Hickson, and that the whole issue that came up at the forum of, are there opportunities to start bands later on at Hickson? So I assume you guys have worked together on this.
Absolutely.
And I think if you could maybe follow up following tonight's presentation with the parents, particularly of incoming sixth graders, I think that would be much appreciated.
We certainly will. Thank you for that feedback.
Dr. Lee.
Do you want to use the docs? Or?
Yeah, I don't know if you have a paper copy, so I just go watch.
They do have paper.
Yeah,
She can
okay.
also use. Do you guys want to use
So I entered Hickson the 6th year of the building's plus for a new schedule. So the teachers handed me, I got on file all the drafts that they had created over the years with all their research. They had looked at a handful of schools and different models. 2 schools in Ferguson, Florissant, Limburg, in Melville, and then of course I brought my Parkway scheduling ones. I was the master scheduler for that building in my last school. So one of the pieces, this is the draft, so it's got draft all over it for next year, but you also have the current schedule of Hickson right now. So the current schedule of Hickson, 7th graders have all their electives in the morning, and 8th graders, and then they have their 4 classes in the afternoon. 8th graders have all their 4 classes in the morning, and then all their electives in the afternoon. So off the bat, it's a little bit of a restrictive schedule if you're trying to get creative for kids and give kids options. The way the schedule is configured. It also restricts seats, so you don't have the flexibility to build different sections to be able to spread and honor kids' first choices and electives. So with the first schedule, the current draft that we're in, just reconfigured it, so when you look at the cores up here, so for the draft next year, math will come off team. And the reason math is coming off team is because we are going to have 3 opportunities for kids to go down a math journey in 7th grade and 3 as well in 8th. So right now it's been a logistical nightmare to keep kids on team with their math class and their team, so it makes sense to preserve teaming that math comes off team. So next year, 7th graders will have the opportunity to go on a journey down math, either math 7, math 8, or algebra. And 8th graders will have math 8, algebra, and geometry. So we've got 6 different roads for kids and possibilities. And if you think about just across the teams, it's a little too hard to keep kids matched up with teams because you also want to balance the teams. You don't want to weight one team with all the kids that are in geometry or all the kids that are in algebra, all the kids that are in math 8, etc. So you want the diversity across the board. In the new draft, all 7th grade teams will have teaming off first hour. And I didn't take the time to fill it in because it is just a blank slate schedule until we get numbers. But you can see from that first line, teachers will have common plan time. So right now, they PLC or meet together for an hour once a month after school under the professional learning community model. And it's really, truly not enough time for teachers to get together to share best practices, to look at assessments, and to problem solve around what they're seeing in their classrooms. So in the new schedule, ELA teachers and social studies teachers will all have the same plan time off during 7th hour, and then math and science will have off during 6th hour. This also gives an opportunity for cross-curricular collaboration as we start to look not just at our cores in isolation and taught in isolation, but to see how we can also connect it across the board. Electives in the new draft, so it won't be until the course registrations come in that we'll be able to actually build in the sections. So we'll have some flexibility. I think 11 teachers have taken the greatest hit in the current schedule. They don't have the security of numbers. They also don't sometimes have the security of the seats. There's usually this last minute scramble that's been happening at Pixton with elective teachers. So once kids sign up, because we've cleaned up the course registration, total protocol for 7th and 8th graders, along with course registration handbook, so it's not confusing. We'll be able to implement, because we are going online and using our SIS capability to do our master schedule with the technology that we have. We will no longer be doing a hand batch schedule. I commend the administrators for doing that. I will not be doing a hand batch schedule. So we will let technology do that beautiful piece, and then we can go in and clean that up. The other unique piece about the new schedule is that we're going to everyday PE. The teacher, so if I step back a little bit, sorry, at our school leadership team meeting, the teachers talked about how this has been a disappointment every year, trying to get a schedule to go, something viable, and then not able to have it happen at the end of the year. So I had a teacher volunteer outside of the meeting come to me, volunteering to take the practice to go to PE Health because she believed in the importance of PE Health every day for kids. It also loses Discovery. So right now, Discovery is the filler. I think it's gone through many evolutions from all the history that I've been granted with coming into Hickson. And so it's used in a variety of ways. It's an every other day filler for PE. Now kids will have PE every day, and teachers will move from teaching 4 sections to teaching 5. So that'll take our class numbers down. I've got an average of kids in classes from anywhere from 25 to 29. In going from 4 sections to 5 sections, we'll decrease those numbers for the core teachers down to 18 to 22. So I think that makes that more manageable because our classrooms at Hickson are large. So if you walk in and to see a class filled to the brim in a middle school, it's not necessary. Part of it was the restriction in the schedule. So that was a lot of the goal too as well, to lower those class sizes. That's it. So everything, we added technology education as well. as another elective option. So to get to everyday PE, and thankfully we were given an additional FTE so we could have 5 PE teachers. And then I folded the teams to create 3 teams in each grade. One is larger, so one will be, the 7th grade has a super team and the 8th grade has a super team. So it's the half teams that are blended inside. And so we were able to create a technology education elective as well to offer another elective choice for students. I think that's just it.
Real quick, just a point of clarification. You keep referencing PE and additional PE, but it's PE/health. And
Yeah.
I would hope that part of that time would be used to provide more education about healthy lifestyles and all of the issues that they're facing, particularly in middle school.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so that was the teacher's passion and the prompting, wanting to bring that lens in and understanding the importance of it.
Okay.
So there will be a health rotation during the bigger the building. I know my teachers are anxiously wanting to see the secret files, but we will have some additional spaces for all of these things to happen.
I think that's huge. I think the more health education we can provide in 7th and 8th
And it'll
grade
be
will serve
year-round
them well.
and
Yeah.
consistent. So we've got some great models that they can use. And I think that we can connect easily. So when I talked about an example of connecting, PE health to a core, science teachers right now are talking about their sustainability work, and we're talking about gardens, and that's easily links into just healthy living, healthy lifestyle. So you get the physical piece, but also the practical parts of how do you live a productive lifestyle. I love it.
Cool.
So transitioning to have PE every day in replacement of Discovery, I know that's when the GEMS and GFA would meet. When will they be, what will that be replacing?
So GEMS is now inside of social studies.
Okay.
So GEMS takes place inside of social studies curriculum. GFA, we will back that up as every other day and do a rotation so that they can still get their time in, but that's still also in the works. We're waiting on the numbers to come in for GFA, and then what that staffing will look like.
So GEMS is gifted, GFA is gifted fine arts. Just
sorry.
Okay. I know. Yeah, I know.
What Joe was talking about, math intervention and reading intervention, how is that going to play out for the students who have to participate in those classes?
So, glad you asked. So I think looking at the data, the data is glaring where we have our deficiencies and gaps. And historically in middle school, from my experience, the pull-out programs are not making the gains for kids. So kids that are historically in the intervention classes tend to be in them for the majority of their career, and we don't see any of the practical transfer. So we're going to do something a little bit different. Math intervention will be a hybrid, where there still will be the pull-out classes for kids needing to work in the substantial gaps with some of the foundational skills. But for other students, there will be a teacher pushing in to work inside of the actual content that they're learning to support the learning. Same thing with reading. Reading as a pull-out program, I'm not seeing it transfer successfully at all in any middle school context. So the greatest place I've seen that success is having an interventionist tag along and co-teach with the ELA teacher and move very intentionally to provide the interventions inside of the actual curriculum, and not just in ELA, but also move to science and social studies and math as well. So that's what we're going to try next year as we reconfigure our intervention classes.
So are they going to be team kind of assigned, those people, or?
Yes. I mean, yes and no. It depends on what those numbers look like. So we're not going to have all the kids that would need intervention support travel together, because there's no way I want to stigmatize them that way. But we'll move the teachers across all 3 teams.
Okay. And the technology education, can you describe exactly what that's going to look like when somebody walks in, and then at semester, where should they be, and what's the goal of me taking that technology?
Right. So the goal in Tech 1 is just the basic introductions to technology, coding, designing a web page, those pieces. When they get to Tech 2, so all of the basic pieces of the introductions to all the different components of technology. Technology 2 will be going a little deeper into what you can do with the technology. So now here you can code and you can build a website. So using a PBL model, what is a problem in the world that your technology can be used to make someone's life better. So there'll be a service component and a service thread. So within social studies, that's a lot of what we've talked about, is moving to also integrate service learning into our curriculum naturally. So with Tech Ed, Tech 2, that'll be the specialty of the independent projects for kids to work either independently or in teams to problem solve real world problems and what can they do from their stance to add to that.
Is that a current staff member, or is that a new staff member?
It's a current staff member.
And are they schooled enough, because a lot of the kids at elementary level can put web pages together and code.
Right. Yes.
So I don't want them to get in there and
Yeah.
go, oh
This is
gee,
boring.
we did this
Yeah.
about 5 years ago.
Yes. Yes, they are schooled enough, and I've got a collaboration with a former colleague who leads the innovation and technology.
Okay, and B and T,
Oh, building and team. So it's
Okay.
it's a hybrid to also allow our elective teams. So modern classical languages to be able to allow them to have teaming time as well in collaboration with alternating building duty schedules.
And I don't know if this is something that would have been included in Dr. Field's emphasis on computer science, but one of the things that Arnold happened to mention about younger and younger kids, things like what we termed at one point in time was called netiquette, was basically net etiquette.
Yeah.
There's so many kids that are exposed to social media at an early level and exacerbates itself into bullying online if that is not addressed at a much younger age. I mean, even at the elementary school level, before they even get to you and Dr. Fields.
Right.
But I would highly encourage that to be part of those kinds of things. The other thing I was going to mention is looking back to my days at Hickson, I know that at one point in time they had, when they were talking about the fact that so many kids wanted exposure to different things, there was a quarter system at that point in time where you had, it was, I think they called it distributive arts, for lack of a better term, or my knowledge, was art, home ec, and shop, and then you, for the fourth quarter, you got to rank them 1, 2, and 3. Is there something like that currently offered, or is that something?
Yeah,
Okay.
and more, and I know Hickson came off the wheel last year, and I know more, like my last middle school is coming off the wheel as well. I think in the age of personalization, coming off the wheel will allow kids more choice, so.
They'll get more depth and length in
Yeah,
their
so,
choice
yeah.
versus exposure, and then,
Yeah, so like art and facts offer, art 1, art 2, and art 3. So you really get to progress deep into your craft, so it's not just.
9
you
weeks
gotta
of
take
hit or
art
miss,
1,
9 weeks of hit or miss.
Yeah, like I hate art, but I wanted to be, I wanted to take facts, but now I'm stuck with this wheel. So they really get the choice, and then if you really, want to pursue that passion, they can go deeper inside of each of those classes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. We now have our second opportunity for public comments. Anybody in the audience like to make a public comment? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items 8.02, 8.03, 8.04, 8.05.
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Emerson? Would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Hit you.
All right, thank you all.
Good, thank you.